Good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday. Happy early Friday Eve. I am here today with a special guest, Mr. Mike Hoffman from SMO Energy, and I am talking to him today about a very special and important topic that many people may not know about. If you are purchasing a home or even selling your property, you may have a big white or some other colored tank in the back of your yard or somewhere on the side of your property. And your agent may present to you this disclosure in your contract. And this particular disclosure is a disclosure of leased items addendum. And so I invited Mike here to talk to me a little bit about what exactly is a leased item, what should you do if you are selling or purchasing a property that has a tank, and special other information that you should know as far as what to do after the fact. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Hello, Mike. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us today. So, lease items. I'm selling my house and I have a tank in the backyard. I'm receiving propane. Where do I go from here? What do I need to do at the beginning to avoid any headaches or pitfalls after my sale?
Well, for the seller, there's fortunately for them not as much they have to worry about as opposed to the buyer. Number one, making sure that they even know that the tank is leased. So a confirmation of whether the tank is leased or owned.
Okay.
And then contact that company and let them know that you are selling. That you may need to be taken off a automatic delivery. You certainly don't want to forget and then sell the home and then receive a delivery, and who's going to pay for that delivery. So really that's the biggest thing is making sure that you do indeed lease a tank, and if you do, and it can also be a buried tank too.
Okay.
Buried tanks, actually, there's more concerns about that. They may even want to ask, well, what happens if the new owner doesn't want to use you? Is there a way to purchase the tank? So those are some additional things that they may end up down the road before the buyer's agent may bring that up before closing. So they might want to go ahead and already know that information ahead of time.
And so there's nothing that can be done with the tank prior to actually selling the home? Like the tank won't be removed before selling the home, or shutting off propane or anything like that?
Typically speaking, no. Some companies such as us, once we have a settlement date, we typically within a week of that settlement date will set up to have that tank locked so that it can't be used.
Okay.
But we're also going to make strides to make sure that we have reached out so that the new owner is aware that that's going to happen.
Okay.
And that is actually something that we're doing that right now is we're improving that process. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing is actually, once we know that there is a house that's going to be sold, reaching out to that seller and seeing if we can get my information passed along to the buyer's agent,
okay,
to the buyer. But not all companies are going to do that. Most of the time, that tank is going to be forgotten about until one day they run out of propane.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be 5 degrees outside, and now you don't have heat, you don't have hot water, and it could take a week or a week and a half to receive a delivery.
Wow.
So best thing to do is to know ahead of time what you're up against, and that's half the battle right there, so that way the buyer can do their research, figure out, do they want to continue using that company? Specifically talking about a lease tank.
Right.
What are their options? Do I have the ability to switch to a different company? If it's a buried tank, a lot of companies will not sell their tanks. It's either you use it or we're going to remove it, and somebody is going to be responsible for the removal cost.
Wow.
So a lot of this is never discussed, and it comes as a shock, and it's 10 degrees outside, and next thing you know, you're signing document that's a contract that now says that now you've adopted those clauses that
Yes.
I'm either going to have to maybe buy the tank, maybe stuck with using them, or having to pay to have it removed.
So I'm the seller. I'm putting my house on the market. As the owner of the home, it is most important that you relay to your listing agent that, hey, my house runs on propane. I have this tank. My tank is leased. I don't own it, meaning that the company who fills the tank is still the owner of that tank. And so it would be the obligation of your seller's agent to include this form, this addendum, that will be given to your buyer so that they know that, hey, the house that I'm looking at has a tank. It is actually leased, and they will have decisions that need to be made once they actually purchase the home. So we had a perfect transaction. I found a home. I'm the buyer of a home who has a leased tank. I did sign this disclosure ahead of time, but because I had so many other things going on while I'm trying to move in and get settled, and it's summer, so I haven't even really thought about propane. Now it's winter time, and I don't know, possibly the tank is low.
Okay.
I now need to think about propane, and the tank says SMO on it. What do I need to do now?
Obviously, give the propane company a call if it's SMO. Most tanks, most leased tanks, there's going to be a name and a phone number on the tank.
Okay.
If it's an underground tank, it's going to be somewhere, maybe you have to lift up a hood to see it, the lid of the tank, but there should be something in writing somewhere on that if you didn't already know.
Okay.
But bottom line is that you contact the company, hopefully you've already gotten rates and you've decided on them, but it sounds like we're talking about a situation where maybe no homework has been done yet.
No homework's done. It's,
Okay.
I moved in, it was summer, and
Right.
now it's getting cold, so
Right.
I want to start thinking about that and, how that process works.
Most of the time, unfortunately, at that point, the tank is empty, and that's how you figured out that the house ran on propane. Oh, yeah, that's right. This is the, and now you're scrambling around.
Right.
And that's, of course, what we're trying to avoid. But in that situation, trying to contact the company that has serviced that tank, and unfortunately, at that point, you're trying to get a delivery as soon as you can.
Right.
So you're probably at that point going to be signing something with them.
Okay. Now, could I have called earlier to have that taken care of, even though I don't need propane quite yet?
Best to have done that right after you get settled in.
Okay.
Or actually, in my opinion, even before you even go to settlement would be the perfect scenario to learn about all of this stuff. So that way you know everything before you purchase. But more realistically, a lot of times it's going to be, okay, I've settled in. That's right, propane tank. I would contact the current provider, find out if they can disclose what type of usage there has been.
Okay.
What all uses the propane in the house, just to make sure that they have on record what you believe is also the case. What their price per gallon is, any offers that they're going to do.
Okay.
But making sure that you really know not just what the special offer is, but based off of the usage, what would be my price per gallon if I was already a customer, and it's say 2 years down the road. It's just important to really have all the right questions to ask, which I'll provide some information on that you can hand out. But being able to have that information is very valuable, so that way now you can call around to other companies and say, this is the size tank that I have, or this is the size tank that I would be interested in to replace the existing tank, assuming it's an above ground tank.
Okay.
And what's your rates and what's your specials?
So you can replace the tank and get a smaller tank if you think you're going to use less propane?
Most companies aren't going to usually step down in size, but the propane company will a lot of times dictate what size tank based off of the estimated usage.
Okay.
More often than not, though, it's just a swap out. If you have two of the big fat tanks they're called 120 gallon tanks, they hold about 100 gallons in each one.
Okay.
That's a standard scenario of say for instance someone's using it for heating and hot water, and maybe it's the backup heating.
Okay.
If we see that there's a higher usage, maybe we add a tank. I mean, there's code that we have to follow, and whether or not you can even fit a different tank in that spot or additional tanks.
Okay.
But yes, the bottom line is that it's important when calling around to know what the current tank size is, in addition to an estimate on the annual usage that you may be looking at.
So I've called around, and I actually have a tank that is from a different company, and I've decided that another company has quoted me a better price. What do I now need to do with this tank, and then what is the process of now getting your tank?
If the other company is willing, you let them know you're going to switch companies, that you'll let them know when it's time to pick up their tank.
Okay.
Most of them actually don't want to pick up a full tank because it's heavy. And so unless they can pull a truck right up to the spot, you're actually doing them a favor probably by waiting until it gets down.
Okay.
So when you've already elected to go with another company, essentially what I typically will tell somebody, if you've never had any dealings and you have not signed anything with that company, sometimes it's best to not even, in my opinion, not even reach back out to them again unless they reach out to you. Go ahead and just continue to use the propane in there until you're down to, say, 20%, a number where you know that it gives us or the company that you've decided enough time to come in and remove those tanks, set them aside, and put in their tanks.
Okay.
The reason why I say you might not necessarily want to reach back out to that other company unless they've already given you an ultimatum of you need to let us know by a certain time, is because it's going to start the clock if you do call them.
Okay.
If you say, yes, I have chosen another company, they might say, well, you've got 30 days to go ahead and switch over to the other company, otherwise we're going to pick up the tank.
Okay. I'm calling around. Are there any key bullet points that you have that the buyer should be asking?
Yes. Very often, actually most of the time when you call in, the only rate you're going to hear is what your initial fill is going to be, or maybe they'll say that we're going to lock this price for a year.
Okay.
And it sounds very attractive. But then if you didn't ask any other questions and you just went solely off of that, maybe a year later you get a bill and it's double the price on the price per gallon. Maybe now you have a lease fee because you're not using enough. So the key questions that I would suggest is find out what the special is, ask them if that's a special, find out what the market rate is. That's the key question, is market rate. But then also find out, is that market rate, what's that market rate based off of how many gallons, and what happens if I use less than that? What happens if I use more than that? Find out, if you can find out where the tiers are. They may not tell you what the tiers are, but it's just a good question to ask.
Now, how often does market rate fluctuate?
Market rate, actually, I can only speak for us, but for residential pricing, it could change in a week, it could change in a day, but most often it's more of a monthly thing, and then it's going to fluctuate.
So is my bill fluctuating? How does that work?
You're going to get whatever the price per gallon at the time of the delivery, whatever that market rate is that day.
Okay.
But I guess the better way to answer that is for propane, at least with us, the market rate fluctuates summer versus winter, 30 to 50 cents a gallon. Okay. So best time of year to buy the gas, if you have the option to choose when you have it delivered, is the summertime. Okay. But if you're needing multiple deliveries, or if the company is adamant that they're going to set their delivery schedule, it's gonna, you're going to have high price and low price balance out throughout the year. Okay.
Is there anything else that we should know? Any other important thing that we need to talk on? I think we covered seller. We said that primarily the buyer is going to be the one that has most of the responsibility with the situation. Is there anything else you can think of that we...
The biggest thing is the underground tanks.
Okay.
When you get into underground tanks, especially on a foreclosure or a short sale where you might not know who owns that tank, somebody should make a phone call to whatever number is on that tank.
Okay.
If there's no documentation on that tank, most companies are going to be able to provide you a form that says, to the best of my knowledge, this is my tank.
Okay.
But going back to, if you do find out or know that this is a lease tank, before you sign anything with them, you should be calling around, and preferably even before closing, find out what are your options.
Okay.
Do you have the ability to buy the tank? Does the seller have the ability to buy the tank prior to closing? Is there a way to remove the tank and put in another company's tank? If you go that route, no company is going to want to dig up that tank. And since you have not signed anything with them, you've got the upper hand. You might be able to negotiate a very good price for that tank.
Okay.
Knowing the condition of the tank, I mean, I certainly, if someone's going to take that route, would have no problems going out and just setting my eyes on the tank. Or if a realtor or the potential buyer takes a picture and I look at that tank, I might be able to tell you whether or not that tank looks like it's in a decent condition.
Okay.
It's underground tank. That's a chance that you take.
Right.
There is a test that we do called cathodic protection testing.
Okay.
It would be wise that if you are looking at buying the tank, to make sure that that tank has already or is going to pass. So prior to buying it, having that tank tested for cathodic testing.
Wow. It's kind of a lot to know for the little white tank that is on the property. So this is definitely great stuff. Great information to know. Again, not to scare anyone off, but you just want to know your responsibilities if you are looking at a property that does have a tank, and just kind of what to do and where to go from there. Questions to ask your seller. If you're being the seller, again, making sure that you're disclosing to your listing agent that you do have a tank that's a leased item, providing the company information, as well as helpful information as far as usage and your current price that you were quoted off of that usage. Those things would all help in a smooth transaction for your buyer after they take possession of the home. So can you think of anything else?
I actually just thought of two things.
Sure.
One is that if this is intimidating to have to remember all of that, I'm here as a resource. So definitely,
Absolutely.
As soon as you have somebody interested, and these are things that either you would like to call me about, or the buyer would like to call me about, or the seller, if you know, I'm here as a resource for you. The
Thank you.
other half of this that we haven't even talked about, that I just thought about, was, and this is normally an above ground tank issue, is does that tank location even meet safety code? Because there's a lot of times where you say, okay, yes, I've settled on another company,
Mm-hmm.
and that company comes out and says, ooh, we can't even set a tank there because it's within 10 foot of an ignition source, or
Oh, wow.
5 foot of a window. So there's code that something I wouldn't inconvenience you guys with having to worry about, but a simple stepping far enough back and taking a picture and sending it to me.
Okay.
A lot of times I can tell you definitively right there, yay or nay, that tank does meet safety code, or maybe I need to swing by and take a quick measurement, because if it doesn't, where would a tank go? Or, you know, is there an alternative to just moving it over to the side?
How would that happen?
There's a lot of permits that are out nowadays
That weren't out.
weren't out
Okay.
then,
Okay.
or no one pulled a permit. Certain companies don't always do things by the book, but
Okay.
just more often than not, if it's a new construction, for instance, there was a permit for the gas lines inside, and they just assumed that the company that does the propane was going to do things by code, and they took the path of least resistance and said, well, we're just going to set a tank where that gas line comes out, and ignore the fact that it is too close to a window or too close to an ignition source.
Gotcha. Yeah, you definitely want to take those into consideration. I mean, we're talking about gas here, so.
Well, and maybe that can be something that, and I'll be honest, home inspections, the home inspectors don't a lot of times pay attention to. So maybe this is something that if I got to see, you can have that seller maybe fix with their existing supplier.
Okay.
A lot of times we'll include it at no cost to bring it up to code. Someone's going to sign an agreement with us, as long as we have an alternative, we can say, look, yeah, if we set our tanks, we're going to go ahead and fix that for you.
Okay, that's awesome. Anything else?
Not that I can think of right now.
No? All right, so there you have it, folks. A lot of information. I think the most important thing is if you are a seller and you know you have a tank, you want to definitely take the precautions necessary to alleviate any headache for your buyer coming in and purchasing the home with the item. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming in and for providing all of this information. As he said several times, he is definitely a great resource that we can utilize if you have any further questions, or if you're currently selling a home or thinking about selling a home and you have a leased item and you weren't really sure what to do, and maybe this prompted you to think of some things, feel free to reach out to me. I can contact Mike. I can pair you guys up, get your information, and he can definitely come out and help you with whatever you need. And again, just keep this in mind. If you're a buyer and you run across a property that does have one of those tanks, and you want to know more about it, reach out to me as well. We'll get you the information you need. So thank you so much. I hope everyone has an amazing and wonderful weekend, and I will be in touch soon with more information such as these. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.